Hello and welcome to another episode. Today we are going to discuss how to get the most out of Lychee Slicer. And I don't mean like a full feature list, but I'm definitely going to go over a lot of the functions and features of the software. And I'm going to teach you how to get the most out of it, especially if you're a beginner, and then even more so if you're already kind of versed with Slicer software. This can help you transition from other softwares that you're using. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm going to go over every single feature, but I'm going to go over the ones that I feel that are important, that'll help streamline and quicken your pace when it comes to supporting your models. Let's get into it. All right, so we're taking a look at some models here. First from Witchsong Miniatures. If you're not familiar, I'll make sure that we have a link in the description below. If you are familiar, you know that they make some pretty dope models that are some really, really high detail stuff too. This is one of the busts. It's the Faceless Queen, and she's just an example of something we're going to be working with, so I can show you some of the features. Now, if you're brand new to Lychee and you don't know anything about the software, and you just don't understand anything, and you're completely new, I highly advise checking out some of the tutorials on Lychee's own channel. They do have some really good ones just getting you into the software itself, because you will be able to manipulate, move the stuff around. Those kinds of tools I'm not really going to go over too much because I'm assuming you might know how to do that already. But in case you don't, we'll briefly cover that there is a move tool, which allows you to move the objects up, down, left, right, in the three dimensions that you need to move them. Then you also have rotation, which allows you to rotate the object, auto orient the object, um, put to plate. You can turn it, orientation to object based on where a point on the object, and all those are just rotation features. There's an arrange feature, which allows you to auto arrange, or move. And that's I don't really ever use that function. There's a scale function, which allows you to, as you guessed it, scale the object. There's a copy function, which allows you to make duplicates. Mirror, which allows you to flip the object in directions such as left to right, right to left, etc. And it mirrors, it will flip it. And then there's your cutting tools and your split tools down here. You have cut and split, and we will actually discuss some of those in this video today. So I guess we'll start with actually that, because these are kind of fairly simple. So if you're working with a smaller printer, which I'm not here, and you had a very large piece that you wanted to use, but you did not, let's say it was not split up properly, one of the neat functions you can use is something called the planar cut. And you simply, from the layout tab, you simply click on planar cut, click on the scissors, and this is going to give you this plane here, which you can then rotate and move however you want to create a cut. And you can cut I'm just going to show you. I'm going to undo this, but I'm going to show you what it does. You cut it, and then boom, you have now two solid parts where there used to be one. Now, of course, there's no keying in here, so you're just going to have to wing it when it comes to putting this back together. I only suggest using this in the extremest of cases, when you really need to cut something in half and it's just way too big. Not always a good idea. Also, you have your part split, which is different from cutting. That will essentially split. And this doesn't have any split parts, but if it was made of multiple parts, it would tell you that the object was made of X number of parts, and you could then split it, which would then separate it. Like, say, for example, if you had two objects that were not connected by geometries, but were technically part of the same STL, you could split them, and then that would create the two separate objects. And that is pretty much planar cut and split. I can demonstrate mirror here if you want to see how that works. You'd simply click one of these arrows, and it would mirror the object for you. Copy, seems pretty self-explanatory. I don't need to demonstrate that one. It copies the object. You can also auto-arrange on copy or keep arrangement on copy. And that is something to note when you actually go to do that. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into some of the more nitty-gritty of features. You have this cool button down here called Magic, which I don't necessarily recommend using, but if you are a beginner and you have never done this before, I have heard of some people getting some luck with this. However, with a model like this, with a big chunky bust like that, that's got all this extra mass, I don't think it's a great idea to try to go ahead and just click the Magic button. Probably going to have a bad time. There's a reason why it says I'm feeling lucky. Anyway, moving along to the prepare section of the software, let's talk about a bit more of the meat of the application, which is the prepare tab anyway. So once you get into your prepare tab, you're going to notice over here your left menu has changed, and we have another menu over here to the right as well. So your sub menu has changed on the right, and your actual navigation system on the left has changed as well. You have something called visibility, we have support, raft, hollow. There's an exterior button, which is grayed out, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the first thing you want to do, probably with an object like this, is definitely hollow it. It is big, it is chunky, it deserves some hollowing to save you both some material and some stress on your printer when it's printing. This will also require less supports, which in general requires less material too. So, how do we hollow? Well, we simply click the object, click the hollow button, then choose the type of hollowing. In our case, we're going to use 3D hollowing, and I'll explain the other one in a moment. And we're going to go 3D hollowing, and then you're going to choose your wall thickness, which I usually go about 1.7, and a quality between 1 to 4. And yeah, you can go increments of 1.1, 2.1, whatever. The reason I choose 4 is because it's the smoothest interior. It causes for less internal supports, and it makes it a little bit easier at the end of the day to do. When you're done with that, you go ahead and click the Add Update button, and that's going to rebuild the interior of your model and hollow it out. And then now we can click this interior exterior button, and it will show us the inside of the model. Now, if we would have done this with a lower quality, you see how chunky that looks? This is why I much prefer to do it this way. Takes a bit more time, but I think it's a bit easier to work with. So now, one of the things you need to do once you've done your hollowing is you will need to actually add something called drain holes. And we'll explain that now. So drain holes allow the prevention of suction because once this starts to build and it has hollow, it's going to act like a cup. And the cup is going to retain suction, and it's going to create a vacuum inside the print. That's kind of off there. That is going to make it harder for the printer to do its job. So we don't want to make it harder for the printer to do its job. We want it to be as easy as possible for the printer to do its job. So you add your drain holes by simply clicking on the holes section, as I just demonstrated there. You choose the size of the hole, and obviously go with something that's going to fit whatever area you're working with. But try to make sure it's a little bit larger than 2 millimeters. Don't go much smaller than that because the drain holes just become so small. In most cases, the printers will just cure them over, and you won't have a hole. You can go as low as like 1.5, 1 millimeter, but anything lower than that is kind of negligible. It's not really going to work. So I usually work with between like 3 and 5 when I'm talking about something of this size, and I think these are all 3, and then this one's a 5. So you can see how that works there. And then we've got this little ledge back here. That's also part of this. And we're going to want to drain that too because this little ledge is going to prevent that. So let's go ahead and add a couple holes right along this edge here. And then we'll do something that the software allows us to do, which is down here. It's called the suction cup detector. So once you're done with all that, you're going to click this, and it's going to tell you where your possible suction areas are going to be. And we still have some. Looks like here in the neck area or beard, whatever this mask thing. And that's probably because it comes dipping down a little bit sooner than the face does. Yeah, you can see where it opens up here, but it's not connected to anything yet. So one of the things we can do with that, and this is a little bit more advanced, is we can go into this section over here called blockers. And then we're going to click on add blocker. And now you're kind of greeted with these 3 rudimentary shapes. You just have a cylinder, a block, and a ball. Cylinder, block, and a ball or sphere. You can now use those to create blocked areas on the geometry that will not be allowed to hollow. So here I'll demonstrate here. We'll put some along the area. And Now we'll update that. And you'll see once this updates, now this whole section is now solid. And then you can just exit the blocker section like that. And we can retest our suction cups by going here. And you'll see that the one in this area is now gone. So once you've got your holes and stuff situated where they should be, and we can probably even pop a hole here in the side of the arm, and we could probably even put some holes here along the side, but you don't need to go crazy. It really just needs to be enough to maintain drainage and make sure that they're big enough. And I think we're okay here. So when you're done, you're going to want to highlight all the holes in your object, and you're either going to want to do one of three things: cap and holes, cap only, which doesn't make sense. I mean, unless you're going to leave them as virtual holes, or hole only. And I'll explain the virtual hole in a minute. So Lychee creates these little objects these are virtual holes. These they're not really punching a hole in the geometry right now. It doesn't act like you can still view the interior exterior. When you punch them out, they literally remove the space. So now there is nothing. Whereas if you were to left them, Lychee treats them a little bit differently, and even treats the whole model a little different. Now you can see the exterior button is now grayed out again, and the only way you can look inside is now by using your slider over here on the right, which is your layer slider, and that will allow you to scroll up and down inside the model. So once you're done doing all your hollowing work, if you even have to, there are going to be times when you probably won't. A lot of small stuff doesn't require hollowing. So this is really only an example of a bigger thing. We'll get into smaller parts in a minute. You'd want to support it. And we also use things called rafts. And Lychee has a couple different styles of rafts. My favorites are the line triangle. And I don't hate the shape raft. That one's okay too. The shape wall is pretty good too because it gives you this little wall here, which is a nice way for you to take them off with your scraper when you do remove them from your build plate. So this is actually a pretty good one for that. So we'll use that one for our example. And we'll go ahead and apply a raft to this as well, since I won't be hollowing that piece. It's not really big enough, doesn't really call for it. We'll just support it properly, and I'll go over some of the other tools as we do that. So one of the neat tools you can use in Lychee is it has a really great auto supporting system. And I know I've knocked it a few times in some of my other videos, and I say you shouldn't use it all the time. But when you're new to the software, I'm pretty sure this is one of the better ways to get an idea of how maybe you can support the stuff yourself without having to go through hours and hours of YouTube videos. So my suggestion is to kind of take note of some of my settings. They're going to be in the description of the video as well. If you're doing anything heavier than this, keep in mind the heavier it gets, the heavier the tip and the bar need to be. But in my case, I'm going to use my mediums, which you can see there, the tip diameter, tip length, and diameter, what those are. And then we're just going to auto apply that. Auto and generate. And I have this on high for support density. The reason I choose high is because normal, it doesn't really put enough supports in some places, and ultra is way too much. High is a decent sweet spot, especially if I'm just looking to do a quick job and get the support work done as quickly as possible, especially if it's just for me. I don't care so much. I'm not so picky. And as you can see, it did a pretty decent job of applying supports. It looks a little under-supported in some of these little peaks out here, like these little bits probably need to still be supported. Those are probably some islands that it just did not catch or could not support on its initial run. And then some of it looks very clustered together like this, but also due to the orientation of some of the parts of this, model. So that's one way to do it. You can, however, use an alternate method to supporting your model, and because he's not done, this whole model needs to have perimeter supporting done down here at the bottom, which you can use the support painter on, And the support painter is a great tool. This is another one that's going to save you tons of time in your process. And easy to use. You simply choose the support you want. And we'll go to your manual setting over here under supports. And then you're going to want to make sure that your support painter is turned on and set your interval. I usually work at about 1.5 to 2.2 depending on how big the piece is. So we'll stay at 1.5. And then you simply click and drag your mouse and you'll see the supports disappear, allowing you to see this little red kind of circle. This is where the supports are being drawn. And every time you see a little yellow flash, it's popping another support and you can see where it put those in. And then we'll go ahead and click the bracings button to add some auto bracings. And now the perimeter of the bust is now supported down here in the bottom. And yeah, you probably want to fill in some supports there. Make sure you get those where they need to be. So the whole bottom is then supported nicely. So this is going to have a nice bottom. And then you can kind of go through and do what we call island searching. Island searching goes through the model, checking the layers for islands, which are anything that hangs out of the model that is not directly connected to it. As you can see here, these are islands, these pieces that are floating off on their own. So an island that is not supported is not going to print because it has nothing to print it off of. So these supports here are going to catch this island and allow it to print, as will the rest of them. And you can do this at different layer heights to catch islands at different layer heights, essentially, because different layer heights will make the layers thinner or thicker, thus either causing less or more islands, and that'll allow you to kind of catch more of those. Next is the proximity tool, which is also incredibly valuable. It's simple, you just simply click it, and it will tell you if any supports are in proximity danger, meaning they're either too close to the model or they're too close to some other geometry in the model, inside the model, however. And yeah. So sometimes the view proximity does not work, which is annoying, but if you want to, my best suggestion is don't adjust these so much as just remove them, because going through and adjusting them sometimes is incredibly frustrating and annoying. This is usually an artifact of the auto-supporting process that will create some supports that are either too short or just too close to things, just, I don't know, for whatever reason. And really the best way to fix it is just kind of go and delete them and then recheck the model manually and replace some of these supports. Now you can go into advanced mode and you can alternately adjust the support manually. That is an option. By pressing the spacebar, you can then manipulate the supports and move them however you need to stop the proximity error from happening. And let me show you, if we try it again, it'll show me, okay, there's only one this time. So we can try this again and see if it actually, there we go. Oh, here we go, it's up on the model. Yeah, sometimes when you have a lot of supports on the model, or even just a lot of stuff going on in Lychee, it does, that is a bug that I have encountered from time to time where it will just not let me change that view. Hey, look at that. It's almost like a smiley face. All right. So that's the proximity check. That's very valuable. Definitely need to do that in order to make sure that the supports don't collide with the model. So keep that. That's definitely a positive tool. Utilities is really just lifting the object up and down. This is something that I actually have turned on by default. Every time I import a new model, which is on your layout tab, you can actually say lift on import, which I've turned on, and I put the distance at 5 millimeters. I recommend just doing that so you never forget to ever do that. That's just my suggestion. There's another way to support stuff that you can try, which is really great, called the support projection. And that's also under the auto tab. And you see down here it says start projecting supports. And so we can go, okay, click. And that shows you this weird kind of like floaty thing. And you have the sphere, surface crease, or surface angle. And I go with surface crease. It seems to work pretty well so far. Like here, we'll click on that. And then I'm going to click inside there as well. And then we're going to go down here and we'll click on that. And about that as well. And you'll see it's going to create about 365 supports. They're going to be medium. The border and infill are on, and they are set to different sizes. You can also turn that off. We'll click add, and then boom, it creates this little field of supports. Now, this isn't perfect, and as you can see, it did not apply any supports to this upper area here. But that's okay because it allows me to show you another version of supporting, which is called inline supports, which are great. Inline supports are amazing, just like the support painter. If we go over to our manual tab again, we can see down here there's this option called inline. Make sure that this is also turned off and you use the shift key. Simply place a support at one end, hold shift, and you'll see there's a row of dots that will show up. Press the button again, and boom, you get an entire row of supports. And this is actually one of the fastest ways to lay down supports that I personally think that you can do in Lychee Slicer. It's great. Love using this feature. And there, I mean, that's more supports than that thing could possibly need, but there you go. Now, this thing is probably way massively over supported on the bottom. And even if I didn't add bracings, this would probably be fine. But you can still go ahead and add your bracings and massively overcompensate. Then you probably, again, want to do things like check your islands, check your proximity, and make sure that everything is good. Now, what else is there besides these supporting tools, you're probably thinking, right? Well, there's other ways we can work with things. We don't necessarily have to hollow stuff. But one of the other important things about Lychee Slicer 2 is understanding how to work with the tools. So one of the things that I use a lot, especially when I'm working on manual supporting, is the visibility tab. Visibility allows you to change the types of visibility on the supports. You can change it to tips and bases. You can change it to just tips. You can change it to just tips and middles, or you can change it to contact with these cool little lines, or even just turn the lines off altogether and use one of the other versions too. It gives you a quick look without putting a lot of extra geometry on the screen, and it makes it a lot lighter when you're trying to work on big models or a lot of models at the same time. It makes it a little bit easier on less powerful machines, so if your resources aren't that great, you can still have a decent performance time using Lychee if you use some of these user-friendly view options. There are also some other neat ways to manipulate view and visibility, such as your view menu up here, where you can say which type of supports you want to view, such as view only internal, or which this won't show me because we're not using virtual holes, or the other ones are like view only medium, or view only light, or view only heavy. And those options are essentially to help you kind of take a quick look at the model and how they're being supported. Now, we also talked about there was another way to hollow, and I do want to get into that as well because that is something you can use. So let's take a look at the alternate method of hollowing, and I'll get rid of these objects real quick. And we'll go over to one of the other models, this werewolf body here, and I will show you the 2D hollowing method. This is also an interesting thing you can use. So we go over hollowing again, we go to 2D, we click on the object, we're going to click on On. Then we're going to choose our thickness. I'm still going to go with 1.7. Dimming is off. The density is going to be 20%. Dimming is at 100% there. Pattern is 1.0 millimeters, and we're using a double lattice. And you can see there's the preview. And as we scroll with the layer slider, we will see that the inside of the model is hollow, but it now has this cool double latticing support. And again, you will still need to create holes. This is still a necessity. So do keep that in mind. If they go red like that, that means they're not good. It means they're in a bad spot. And always check to make sure that your holes are going to be in good places. They're not going to intrude. And these look like they are. So they look like they're fine. And this will be fine. Now this area over here needs draining as well, but this doesn't have accessibility to an area for a drain. This is a textured piece. So in this case, maybe we need to swap the orientation of the part a little bit and maybe rotate it a little bit this way in order to prevent that from happening. And let's take a look if that kind of fixes the issue. Yeah, for the most part. And there you go. That's 2D hollowing in a nutshell. And you can't pop the holes out the same way that you would with 3D hollowing. That doesn't work for some reason. So don't do that. Just leave them as virtual holes. And then when you do your support work, even if you do auto supporting here, you will notice that it will not place supports directly in the hole, or it will try its best not to. One of the reasons I use 3D supporting or 3D hollowing so much is because it's a little bit more like kind of like you can see the end result versus this, where it's kind of like, you can see that, okay, good, the supports aren't touching the holes, okay, we're in good shape. But this will pretty much work. You can still support and do things like this with the 2D hollowing. I don't love it. It's not my favorite way to do things, but it will work if you are looking for another way to hollow your objects. So one of the other things that you do need to kind of learn when you get into Lychee and pretty much slicing in general, and if you're from, if you use other slicing software, you know this already, but that's orientation and stuff like that. So we'll bring some of these pieces here. And as you saw, with what I was just messing with, orientation is really important. So we've got like the legs here, the head, the body we just did our little auto support thing on. And then we have the base in the back, which we've angled at about 70 degrees. And we can angle a little bit steeper if we want to, but that's pretty good right there. And these objects I'm not going to hollow because they're just not big enough. This leg, these pieces, they're not, they're good. And you can print these solid. You're good there. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to probably use slightly heavier supporting on the bottoms here, and then kind of work your way lighter around the details. But you can also get away with using inline supports for stuff like this that's round, or you can use a support painter. You can also use a feature known as mirroring, which is great, especially if you're working on bases. And you'll see here, anything that's a symmetrical object, and you're able to mirror it on any particular axis, X, Y, or Z. And that allows you to click on one side, but it creates supports on the other side that is the mirror of itself. And let me tell you, this is literally it doing half the job for you. And by the way, if you didn't know, the werewolf model is by Lord of the Print. The other model we were looking at was Witchsong Miniatures. I will put links to both of them in the video's description if y'all want to check out any of their models. I highly recommend it. They're both very good companies as far as their STLs. I have not tried too many Lord of the Print auto support or pre-support files. I can't tell you whether they're good or not, but they've been around for a while, so I imagine they're good. These folks probably know what they're doing. Okay, this doesn't have a raft, but we can change that. So there's your perimeter. I could probably print this like this, but you might get some sagging in the middle because of the fact that it's just a big flat piece. And I don't think these are going to be enough to support it all the way through. But we can give this some bracings, and boom, voila. There's your initial set of supports. Now, I did say you could also use inline a little differently, and I'll explain. So when you're working with a round base like this, sometimes what you can do is you can use your inline supports to create lines of supports down the middle of your bases. Now, you don't have to create this many. This is overkill as heck here. But this is just an example of how this could work. And you can even kind of do them like this if you really wanted to. And again, all I'm doing is holding shift in between each set of supports. And never letting go of shift. And you can see how quick your workflow can speed up. Now, this isn't exactly the cleanest of jobs, and I'm kind of rushing through this just to make an example, but you get the idea of how this tool can be used. Now, if you ever get to a point where you've worked on supporting on something and you're like, I don't like how this is looking, I want to start over, no problem. Click this little trash can over here, and that will delete everything. My other suggestion is you can undo quite a few sections at a time. So go ahead and try doing that before you click the trash can and completely delete stuff. And you can kind of save your work a little bit. Or you can go back to an autosave file. They do save every 5 minutes, and they're saved in a folder in the same directory wherever the file is actually sitting. Yeah, there is a limitation of the amount of undos you can do, though. So it will eventually get to a point where you have to either decide, am I going to delete these, or am I just going to delete the whole thing by doing that? And then boom, they're all gone. Now, the other thing I talked about orientation, this is important when it comes to parts like these. You see these little claws and stuff. In order to probably best avoid having to overhang that stuff, tilt it in such a way where it's facing a good angle. Now, these claws are just pointing down pretty much, so it's near impossible without laying them like this. And then even then, you still have these overhangs here. So parts like this are sometimes confusing and flustering. And honestly, just put them in a position that works best, and if you can't really get a good position out of it. And these the same. Try to avoid putting these points down. Try to angle it at such a way that, the key is taking a lot of the initial supporting. There we go. And that's still got terrible overhangs there, but a little bit better because they're going in the opposite direction. That actually may be more manageable at that point. All right, so we haven't gone through a actual island supporting or me demonstrating the other way or a manual method of doing supports. And the reason for that is you would just take an entire video of me doing that anyway. But to give you an idea, I've already done the island check on this because sometimes it can take a while. But I'll demonstrate. If you click on an object and you go to island, make sure you're at the desired layer height you want to be, whatever that is, and then hit search. And depending on the complexity of the model, how tall it is, this can take a couple minutes. It can take like a few seconds. Short objects, really small ones at like lower or higher layer heights, like 50, usually will be pretty quick. So once that's done, and it'll show us all of the islands. And you can see all the red dots that are represented on these are islands. Now we can easily choose our type of support and click add all, and that will actually add all the island supports that it needs. Unfortunately, it's trying to go around some of these objects that I've got in the way, but we'll go ahead and move him real quick. Hang on. Oops. Move you over here and go back. And actually, yeah, see, I don't like what it does with some of these because you can see that's a weird placement. These are kind of weird placed because it was trying to avoid that head. But this is just the islands. This is not fully supported. This is just your islands being supported. So once you've done this, you will still need to go through the model one little section at a time and add your own supporting to complete the support. Because if we look at this, it's tucked in there. If we look at these models, they've got a lot of areas that still need to be supported. Like, for example, this entire perimeter zone here would need to be done as well. And you can paint that on. Like I said, the support painter is brilliant. I mean, look how quickly you can do that. And just go ahead, braces, and boom. Now, again, you can still auto support these, even though they've been technically done with the islands already. So you can auto support them. And then what it'll do is it'll delete the supports you put on the islands if you already did that. And then you can go back to your islands and you can say, show me, pretty much, and it will show you all the areas that it took away the supports from. I don't like that one. Add the rest. And you can simply click this little plus sign until it adds them all. Now, usually I will go through and add them manually one at a time. But in the favor of showing you the easy button, this is definitely a way you can do it. I would highly advise, though, once you're done, to go through the model and to check by going up and down like this and making sure that those islands are actually being caught. Sometimes Lychee will sort of miss the center of the mark and leave an island kind of sitting out by itself. This isn't always going to be the case, but it can happen. I don't know why 2D hollowing is turned on for all of those objects. Hang on a second. Off. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so this is actually something I've learned for myself just now, that apparently 2D hollowing is applied to every object on the build plate, which is weird because I don't think it used to work like that. So, hey, just for experiment's sake, yeah, everything on the build plate gets turned on like that. All right, so that is also another fact about hollowing 2D there that you can take away from this video. And I actually wasn't aware of this until just now, and I've been using this software for a while. Apparently, hollowing 2D will affect every object on the build plate. So if you want to use it, keep in mind that every object needs to have drain holes because they will have hollowing applied to them. So again, another reason probably to use the 2D method, not the 3D method, as I think personally it will just be a lot less cumbersome, and at least it makes sense what it does versus the weirdness that 2D hollowing tries to do. Now, again, for a big piece like this, you definitely want to hollow it. So even though we're not doing the 2D hollowing, I would probably still do 3D hollowing. And that pretty much would be that. So that's pretty much it for this episode, guys. I hope this was somewhat informative. I hope you learned a few things about Lychee. I know I did. That 2D hollowing thing kind of threw me off because honestly, I don't use it enough to even know if that was the thing that had been that way the whole time, or if this was actually just something from a newer version of the software that had actually changed the way that functioned. I personally don't feel like that's the way it's supposed to function, because you would think you wouldn't want it to just simply blanket hollow everything across the board, but it did appear that that's what it was trying to do. So that's an interesting one right there. I might have to let the folks at Mango 3D know that is actually happening, because I don't think that's intended. But as far as the other features, I mean, you have your island search, your support preparation, you've got your layer slider, your hollowing tools, your blocking tools, your holes, auto support tools, your island searching tools. I think I already mentioned that one. There's a lot of different features to the software, and it can be daunting, especially when you're getting into this hobby for the first time and you're trying to figure out the best way to use the slicer. So I fully understand the frustration, the confusion a lot of folks will have with the software, especially if you're not familiar with 3D software in general. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the episode. I hope this was educational for some. Hope this was new and learning experience for everyone. And as always, thanks so much for watching the channel. We do appreciate the love and support that we've been getting from the community. And we hope to see you all real soon. Bye now.